Hey everyone, Mitch coming in from the Praetors Voice studio. Welcome to the show. So on today's episode, I've got a battle of the heavyweights for you. That's right, it is Atraxa versus the Dragon, the two most popular commanders out there. Which one is better? Which is more powerful? Which one is all about my opinion on this episode, and your opinion might differ, and that's completely okay. So let's jump into it. I'll dig into why I think one is better than the other, and then you can let me know in the comments below whether you think I'm right or I'm wrong. Let's jump into it. So, first up, Atraxa, Praetors Voice, the perfect creation from Wizards, because this is a commander that has 32,000 decks to its name. Over that, in fact, nearly 33,000 at 3,200, 32,787 if I could read. Anyways, this is the most popular commander according to EDH Rec, and for good reason. A 4/4 Angel that costs 4 mana, every color but red. Flying, Vigilance, Death Touch, Lifelink, and at the beginning of your end step, Proliferate. So keyword soup everywhere on this card. And then also, of course, Proliferate, the main engine of this commander. What this commander is built around, I would say typically, when I am going to be addressing these commanders and saying, okay, how do they stack up against each other? How do they fight each other? I'm going to be saying the best of the best versions of these commanders. And in my opinion, we'll get to that with Atraxa, because you can build, obviously, in a ton of ways with Atraxa. You can go charge counters if you really want to do that, and other random kinds of counters too. You could also, of course, go, well, Infect, Poison. You can go Super Friends. You can go +1 counters, and we'll talk about the different variations of those, or at least ones that you might be including in the most powerful build of Atraxa and how it can stack up against Dragon. I mean, let's go the upside of this one first. Again, it has a variety of builds. It already is a decently terrifying presence. It's only a 4/4, but of course, with a +1 counter on it, it can grow immensely large throughout the game, become a very, very quick kill as well, and it's evasive, has Death Touch and Lifelink, and it can stay back on defense for you too. So yes, this does a lot for you. And it's every color but one. You've got access to nearly every single card in Magic. You're just missing out on red and anything that has red. So we'll see how that stacks up. Now, first of all, when it comes to cards that work well with this, well, we are getting a lot more support over the years for Atraxa. Mostly because Atraxa kind of plays in everything, but also because we also just get a lot of Proliferate cards too now. Cankerbloom. This one is already just a good card, even without just having Proliferate. It's a 3/2 Phyrexian Fungus for 2 mana in green. Pay 1, sacrifice it, choose 1 destroy target artifact, destroy target enchantment, or Proliferate. So this is good removal, a good body again for its mana value, and of course another way to Proliferate, which can be incredibly deadly. Again, when you stack up all these Proliferate effects, yeah, just one effect might not be all that great, but when you stack them up and can Proliferate multiple times in a turn, you can do some crazy things with a couple different strategies. Moving on, Broker's Confluence might not seem like much, but yeah, you get access to this because it's 3 colors, and this can be so good. Choose 3. You may choose the same one more than once. Proliferate. It's kind of all you need to know right there. I mean, also, target creature phases out. Also, target activated, counter target activated triggered ability. It has those options. But just being able to Proliferate 3 times for 5 mana can be game-ending at instant speed in many scenarios. Speaking of proliferating multiple times, throughout the game, you can do that with something like Thrumming Bird. There's also that one white version of this too that is a spirit, and I think it does the exact same thing basically, but also when it hits planeswalkers, I think that one's the same thing. Regardless, a 1/1 Phyrexian Bird that costs 2 mana in blue, flying, deals combination to a player Proliferate. So it can typically get through in at least one of your opponents for the most part, and when it does, you Proliferate. You don't really care about the damage that you're doing with this, though obviously if you get counters on this and make it larger, sure, you can hit hard with that too. Regardless, being able to get through Proliferate again and again and again throughout the game can be a massive amount of value. Xavier Saul, Invested Captain, a 3/3 that has tap, remove a counter for another permanent you control, populate, activate on sorcery. So you can populate, that's nice, but you can also tap, sacrifice a creature, proliferate, activate only as a sorcery. So being able to, again, repeatedly proliferate throughout the game can be absolutely massive for you, and there's a lot of ways to do that these days. also some benefits for doing so. Azuri Stalker of Spheres enters the battlefield. You can pay 3 when you do proliferate twice. Well worth it for the most part in Atraxa decks to do that, obviously. On top of that, whenever you proliferate, draw a card. The amount of card advantage you can get this is absolutely crazy. Digging down into your deck again, even with just Atraxa, it now becomes, oh, you also get to draw a card every single turn with that. But of course, with all these other proliferate effects, you get those too. And I will point out that there are, of course, cards outside of my budget that I'm not mentioning in this episode. I'm just showing you, even on a budget, the power that you can have, the synergies you can have with these commanders. Of course, if you want to consider like, oh, like, you know, that one inexorable tide, you know, card or whatever, you know, 5 mana enchantment, cast spells proliferate. Yes, of course, that's very good, this commander as well. Keep that in mind. Moving on, though, a direction that you can go, and I do believe does deserve some inclusions in even the most powerful build of this commander, and it could be a bit argued on which is the most powerful build. Poison. Poison, I do not believe, is the most powerful build for this commander. Personally, I do think it is pretty powerful. I do think the target on your back might become a bit too big with it, potentially, because you're going to be maybe irking certain players when you're doing this, but we shall see. Prologue to Phyrexis, an instant for 2 mana in blue. Each opponent gets a poison counter, draw a card. This is a card that you can just kind of include in your deck if you need to, just as a cantrip. It doesn't really take up too much in your deck because it does replace itself, obviously. And giving each opponent a poison counter, you just need to start off at 1. You just need 1 for each opponent, and all of a sudden, if you proliferate 9 times, you win. That's all you need to do. And again, for a deck that has all of these proliferate effects, yeah, that can go quite quickly, quite effectively, quite efficiently. Speed efficient, Infectious Inquiry. You draw 2 cards, lose 2 life. Each opponent gets a poison counter. I mean, this is basically a slightly more expensive Sign in Blood, right? Basically, like, easier to cast because it's, you know, not black, so not as specific mana, but it is, you know, 3 mana instead of 2. Losing 2 life, drawing 2 cards, you get a poison counter for each opponent. Yeah, again, all you need to do is start them off at 1. This takes up a draw spot in your deck. Not really taking up too big of a spot in your deck. Yeah, you're going down slightly on efficiency when it comes to actual card draw. You're going slightly down in efficiency versus like a Read the Bone. Sure, you don't get to scry 2 first. But still, you are trading an alternative win condition, essentially, for your deck. You're saying, you know what? Even if I'm going with a different build that I'll be talking about here in a little bit, I still have another avenue to victory. If that build isn't working, my core build isn't working and trying to win in that way because the opponent has this other kind of strategy that's countering it, well, you know what? I've got poison counters on them. If I keep proliferating them, I can take them out because there are very few ways to stop poison counters. There are very, very few ways, and almost no one runs any of the ways to stop them. So therefore, yeah, poison counters just equal a ticking time bomb to take that opponent out. Vraska's Fall, again, slightly less effective, less efficient removal, but still, you can just include this as one of your removal spells because it gives you the alternative route to victory. Vraska's Fall, an instant for 3 mana in black. Each opponent sacrifices a creature planeswalker and gets a poison counter. Again, an edict effect at instant speed would usually cost you 2 mana for the most part, I would say. This, though, is at 3 mana, but yeah, you're paying that 1 extra, that little premium on it just for that poison counter for each opponent, and that is well worth it. Again, that new avenue to victory can be huge. But when it comes to the avenue to victory that you probably are gonna pick, if you're trying to build the most, you know, powerful version of it, in my opinion, and that's strictly due to support for it, because the amount of poison support is decent these days. But the amount of +1 counter support, I just even looked up like budget-friendly cards that even mention +1 counters. There's like over 2,000 of them. Ones that are less than $1, I should say, is budget-friendly for me. So, yeah, you've got cards like Forgotten Ancient, a crazy good card. 0/3 elemental for 4 mana. Whenever a player casts a spell, you get a counter on it. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may move any number of counters from Forgotten Ancient onto the creatures. This can build throughout the game so large, and then you just disperse those counters out. And all you need is 1 counter of each of your creatures, and all of a sudden, your proliferate effects have more impact because they are affecting more of your creatures, getting more counters on them and making them hit harder. And this +1 counter build also makes it so your commander can again become a win condition for you itself. You can go Voltron with this too. So you've got, even just in a very powerful build that is very focused, and I will say you do want to be focused. You don't want to, and that is probably a trap with Atraxa, is that you don't want to be like, well, I could include this, and then this, and this, and this. you do want to try to focus as much as you can. You don't want to just throw a bunch of planeswalkers in there too because you're like, well, counters, so they get bigger. You want to focus as much as you can. And so with these counters, you can say, you know what, I'm focusing on this, but that also allows me to win with Atraxa. It allows me to win with a Voltron. And then just maybe include some of those poison synergies in there as well, but ones that really don't take up additional spots in your deck. Again, just a slightly less efficient, edict effect, a slightly less efficient draw effect as well, but they give you that different avenue to take your opponents out. I'm not saying throw a bunch of infect and toxic creatures in there as well. You can if they make sense, but more so include those in addition. Include those small pieces that just take up a spot like a draw spell, take up a spot like a removal spell, and then focus mostly on your counters because, yeah, you also have cards like Feldar Retreat. Then there's a battlefield in your control. Choose one, create a 2/2 cat, or put a counter on each creature you control as creatures gain vigilance out of turn. So this helps you go wide and tall, and yeah, both things are amazing, especially, again, getting a counter on every single one of your creatures. Because what that does, again, is it opens up the possibility for your proliferate effects to affect every single one of them. You can also make proliferate hit so much harder with cards like Hardened Scales, which somehow is budget-friendly. Now it's gotten some reprints recently. Enchantment for 1 mana. When 1 or more +1 counters are placed on creature you control, that many +1 are placed on it instead. So every single time you proliferate, you are doubling up that proliferation for those counters, which is absolutely huge, especially with those repeatable proliferate effects. You can also get other benefits like Inspiring Call. Instant for 3 mana. Draw a card for each creature you control with a counter on it. Those creatures gain indestructible out of turn. Again, if you got a counter on every single one of your creatures, which there are plenty of ways to do, great. All of a sudden, you save them from whatever board wipe, whatever danger there is, again, for 3 mana. Save your entire team. And on top of that, draw an absurd amount of cards. So again, this opens up so many possibilities when you're utilizing cards like this. Or how about Fathom Mage? Again, we talked about Azuri earlier. This is kind of the same thing. Fathom Mage, but better actually. A 1/1 evolving human wizard for 4 mana. Whenever a counter is put on Fathom Mage, you may draw a card. The reason I say this would be better is that in the scenario essentially where this already has a counter on it, you've got other ways to get counters on it outside of proliferation as well with a deck like this, like Feldar Retreat, like I said, or Forgotten Ancient. And then all of a sudden, yeah, also proliferate effects work with it too. So you can draw an absurd amount of cards. Again, there's so many synergies with this commander when it comes to counters, and there's so much support for +1 counters. Again, even on a budget. Of course, I didn't even mention cards like Doubling Season, etc., 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 which of course work incredibly well with Atraxa. But yeah, this is a commander that, again, can go in so many different directions. Now, for this head-to-head matchup against the Dragon, though, again, my build that I'm saying is the most powerful version of this, and you might disagree, and that's okay, is counters. +1 counters. I guess counters in general, right? But +1 counters, essentially. And yes, if you have a little bit of poison sprinkled in there where it makes sense, where you're not just throwing the deck synergies off, including a bunch of like toxic and infect creatures on top of that, include the ones that make sense. Include things that make sense. Like, okay, my edict effect maybe costs 1 more than it would. My draw effect costs 1 more than it would. Take a little bit out of that because you know what? Now you have extra avenues to victory, including, again, your commander with the poison, with the counters, a lot to do. Again, an amazing commander. There's a reason it's so popular. Let's see how the Dragon stacks up now. So, next up, the original, the gigantic, the massive. It's the Dragon. Original, I mean, when I'm saying original, it's like, is that the origin of the dragons? Like the something like that. Lore people out there, let me know, okay? Like, I believe it's like the something. It's usually like the first, where everything else came from. Kind of. I don't know. Anyways, it's a massive dragon, a 10/10 dragon avatar for 9 mana in Wooburg. 4 in Wooburg, essentially. Eminence. As long as it's in the command zone on the battlefield, other dragon spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. Flying, whenever one or more dragons you control attack, draw that many cards, and you may put a permanent card from your hand on the battlefield. This is a crazy, 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 crazy effect. If you've never seen a Dragon deck go off, it is a sight to behold. This commander has 24,000, much more than 2,000, 24,376 decks to its name, according to EDHREC. Good enough for second place behind Atraxa. And yes, this commander, already let's talk about one leg up that it does have on Atraxa. It also has red. So again, Atraxa gives you access to nearly every card in Magic, right? It's missing red and everything that has red in it. Dragon says, you're missing nothing. I give you access to everything. I am a Wooburg commander. I love Wooburg personally, but yes. Anyways, that's not going to influence my decision on who wins this potentially, but we shall see. But yes, the Dragon gives you access to everything, and of course, all the dragons out there. On top of that, another leg up it does have on Atraxa is that whether this is in the command zone or on the battlefield, it is already benefiting you. So if it's just in the command zone, you start the game off essentially with Eminence, with a ley line, kind of, that just can't be touched. You just have, okay, I get an automatic cost reduction for my dragons, which I'm going to be building this deck around dragons. I don't know if you knew that, but this deck is going to be built around dragons. So congratulations to me. I get an extra benefit to start the game off right away. That being said, unlike Atraxa, the mana value for this one is quite high. Atraxa's at 4, which is pretty middle of the road-ish to lower end, and this one is at 9, which is definitely on the higher end. That being said, obviously you have access to green just like Atraxa does too, so you can ramp very efficiently and effectively. Now, when it comes to the build around this commander, there really isn't much debate on what the most powerful build is. I mean, I guess maybe there's some like weird combo thing out there where you're like, well, this thing's technically a dragon spell and do. Maybe. But yeah, you're probably going to be building, and the most powerful build around it typically are going to be dragons. Now, ironically, the first card I'm going to mention is not a dragon, but Dragon Lord Servant. A 1/3 Goblin Shaman for 2 mana in red. Dragon spells you cast cost once to cast. There are other effects like this that can help reduce the cost of your dragons. Dragons have a lot of support out there. Dragons have been a creature type in Magic, I believe, since the very beginning, essentially, and over the recent years, we've gotten more and more powerful dragons. I mean, the support for dragons is pretty crazy. So yes, we've got other effects to reduce their cost because dragons typically cost a decent amount, especially the most powerful ones. Crucible of Fire. Comes to efficiency though, this is a crazy good anthem. An enchantment for 4 mana, dragon creatures you control get +3/+3. Let's compare that to another pretty popular anthem out there, Heliod's, whatever it is. Anyways, the Heliod's one that has flash that costs 5 mana in total in white. Creatures you control get +2/+2. That costs 1 more. Sure, you have flash, but how many times you still probably would utilize it, but like, haha, combat trick. Yeah, okay. I mean, is it really worth that, like, extra mana for that? Maybe not. Anyways, this is an extra pump effect for 1 mana less, essentially, right? Because it is specific to dragons. That being said, turning your creatures into even more massive dragons is pretty absurd. And because you have access to red, of course, you've got access to, well, additional combats. You've got access to double strike, which you've got some access in other colors, but not nearly as much. Red gives you access to some amazing things that, again, you don't get with Atraxa. Moving on. You also have access to some amazing dragons that give you dragon benefits. This one, Furkrog, Cunning Instigator, a flying hasty dragon. Whenever one or more dragons you control attack an opponent, goad target creature the player controls. Whenever a creature deals combat damage to one of your opponents, if that creature had to attack this combat, you get a counter on this creature and you draw a card. So this can provide you somewhat removal in a way with goading effects, like it's sending that creature into danger typically, or at least sending them out of your way. And then also, yeah, card advantage and growth too with this. That is pretty absurd. I will mention too that sometimes I'm, showing off like weird versions of these. Like this is like the etched version, which for some reason is much cheaper than the other version, so it is within my budget. So there you go. Next, Astral Hunter. Whenever another dragon enters the battlefield you control, you get a treasure token. Just free mana every single time you're playing dragons, on top of the extra, reduction that you're getting from your commander and what other effects as well. Lovely. Next up, on Dragon's Legacy. Whenever you cast an adventure spell, don't care about that with this deck, or dragon spell, that's what we care about, it's going to deal damage to that spell's mana value to any target that isn't a commander. So basically, Warstorm Surge in dragon form, which obviously can make a massive impact throughout the game, except again, for whatever reason, they mentioned that isn't a commander. That's very random, and I don't know why they did that, but they did. So there you go. Well, it's a feel bad. Okay, but okay. Next up, Thrakus the Butcher. Hey, you want a dragon that makes your dragons even better? 3/4, 5 mana, trampling dragon. Whenever it attacks, double the power of each dragon control until end of turn. This on its own nearly turns your dragon into a one-shot KO. And like I mentioned with Atraxa, yeah, we do have ways to make Atraxa into a one-shot KO eventually. Like, it takes some time to build those counters, obviously. You can do them very quickly, though. But it takes some time to get there. You can turn into a 2-shot KO. This is like, oh, no, you're like almost there. Like, you're just right there, right? You're at 20. It's close. I mean, if you have Crucible Fire out there, your commander's in for 26. Lovely. And of course, all your other dragons, obviously. You can win with Voltron. You're not going to build Voltron with this commander typically, but you can win with a 1-shot or 2-shot KO. You can win with commander damage from your commander, but typically you're like, I've got a ton of dragons in play. They're all very powerful. Oh, I double their power up. Y'all are in trouble. Wrathful Red Dragon. You're also in trouble if you hit my dragons. 5/5 Flying Dragon for 5. Whenever a dragon you control is dealt damage, deals that much damage to any target that isn't a dragon. So again, kind of like a ouchie enrage Warstorm Surge in a way. But yes, again, it's efficient already. It's a 5/5 flyer for 5. Back in the day, you'd be like, my goodness, the most powerful thing of all time. How did they make this? And these days, it's like, oh, okay, well, they also put this really good thingy on it. Yeah, that makes sense. So your dragons, whether you're blocking, whether you're attacking, you're also just dishing out damage now to Myrdum. And maybe we'll get to an episode at some point with this one and the comparison, because it's quite a popular commander as well. It's a 6/6 Dragon Spirit for 6 mana in this. This is Flying and Ward 2. Ward 2. It's already protected. And on top of that, it says whenever another non-token dragon enters the battlefield under your control, create a token's copy of it, except the token isn't legendary if the dragon is legendary. You double up every single one of your dragons. You double them all up. Every single one. Including the legendaries, including your commander. Gross, disgusting, absurd dragon support on a 6/6 flyer with Ward 2 for 6 in Teamer. Yep, that's gross. And also, again, I am putting out the weird version of this card. Not the weird version, I should say, an alternative art version. The least like, even though I love these designs, but apparently they're a lot cheaper than the other ones. Anyways, Atraxa World Render. Again, we already talked about, hey, with Rakkus, we can double up power. Well, let's just double things up again. 6/4 dragon with flying and trample for 7 mana. Whenever a dragon you control attacks, it gains double strike until end of turn. Hey, you know what's better than hitting your opponents once? Hitting them twice, especially ones that have maybe combat damage triggers. But yeah, your commander again, turning it nearly into a 1-shot KO. And with Rakkus, it's definitely a 1-shot KO. Even if you somehow weren't playing with commander damage, you'd be like, you're at 40. I hit you for 40. Ha. Yeah, you can take your opponents down in absolutely no time with this. Sunscorch Regent. Again, we talked about Forgotten Ancient earlier, which can grow throughout time. This one can also grow as well. A 4/3 dragon with flying for 5 mana. Whenever opponent casts a spell, you get a counter on this and you gain 1 life. It doesn't count your spells, but still, blank commander, 3 opponents, lots of spells to be cast, lots of life to be gained, lots of threat for this to become absolutely massive. Reusai the Falling Star, again, outside of just dragon synergies, there's other synergies with these dragons that are absurd. A 5/5 dragon spirit with flying that costs 6 mana. When it dies, deals 5 damage to each creature without flying. Pretty much all your creatures are going to have flying for the most part. All your dragons for the most part. There are some that don't, right? We already talked about one that didn't. Thrakkus, I believe, doesn't. But yes, all your dragons for the most part are going to survive. Your opponent's creatures probably aren't going to be so lucky. This is a good mid to high board wipe, essentially taking out a decent amount of creatures with a decent amount of toughness. On top of it being a 5/5 flying dragon that helps you out in a lot of different ways. Scourge of the Throne. Hey, what's better than attacking the dragons once? Attacking them twice, or even more, I guess. 5/5 flying dragon for 6 mana with dethrone. Whenever attacks for the first time, each turn, if it's attacking the player with the most life or tied for the most life, untap all attacking creatures after this phase, initial combat phase. This obviously can help you a lot, being able to be like, oh, I hit you for a ton. Cool, I get to swing again. Yay! A lot of people are going to get taken out in that way. And of course, you get extra, again, attack triggers like your commanders, combat damage triggers as well. Lots of fun to be had for you. And of course, like I mentioned earlier, you obviously have access to red with this commander as well, which Atraxa does not. So you get all those juicy extra combat spells as well. And again, having access to all colors and all things, of course, you don't have to just, stick to just specifically dragon things, but the things that synergize with dragons. Like, dragons have a lot of power, so Garruk's Uprising can be very good. Enters the battlefield to control a creature power 4 or greater, draw a card. Check on pretty much every single dragon I have in the deck, most likely. So yeah, I'll be drawing a card. Creatures can roll trample, get damage through. Again, dragons typically have flying, which is very good evasion, and typically can get through at least one opponent. But even if your opponents have flyers, chances are they're nowhere near as large as yours, and being able to get through on them, not just, getting chump blocked, can be great. On top of that, whenever a creature power 4 or greater is battlefield to control, draw a card. An absurd draw engine for you as well. All your dragons essentially drawing you cards when they come into play. You can do some crazy things with this commander, and yes, this commander is one that does, again, cost a decent amount. You can ramp to get it out, and when it does, if you are going off, if you are attacking with a lot of dragons, that's so much card advantage, and cheating something massive into play absolutely lovely. And then maybe attack again. You can do a lot of crazy things with this one. So this commander, again, has a lot to offer. Let's now talk about which one, in my opinion, is more powerful. So, which commander is better between Atraxa, the Praetor, Voice. I was going to say it's a Praetor. It's not a Praetor. Praetors Voice versus the Dragon, which may or may not be, lore mages out there, help me out, may or may not be the originator of the dragons. Which one wins, in my opinion? Now, again, when it comes to how I am determining this, it is 100% based off of my own personal opinion, and yours might differ, and that's okay. And I'd love to hear your opinion in the comments below. Let me know why I'm right or why I'm wrong. At the end of the day, I do believe... Drumroll, please. You probably can't hear that because the mic's up here, but anyways. I think Atraxa is actually the more powerful of the two. Atraxa is better of the two. I think Atraxa, again, does have more support with what it wants to do. And again, I'm talking about a actually focused version of Atraxa, okay? I'm not just talking about, well, if you count the support for, like, everything, like, you know, charge counters and super friends and poison and counters. No, I'm talking about, like, if you focus the deck like I believe it should be focused for its most powerful version, which, again, in my opinion, would be +1 counters, complete focus, with a tiny bit of poison included in there where it makes sense. Like, again, having a slightly less efficient draw spell, having a slightly less efficient removal spell, that's okay to give you another avenue to victory. Atraxa is a commander that is lower to the ground. Yes, you're missing out on red, but when it comes to, I would say, a splash color that you want in your deck that includes, like, additional cards, like, okay, like, I really want this removal, I want this for this, I want this for this, red is probably the one that you can cut. Like, red is probably the one you can cut. It's not the weakest mono color, in my opinion. That's a different discussion for a different day. That'd be white, most likely. But it is the one that you don't need to really splash. Again, out of all the other colors, you'd probably pick some other ones over them. Like, again, white has amazing removal. Red has good removal. Red has decent draw. But it's not the best at all those. It's the best at, like, aggressively attacking. Regardless. When it comes to that, Atraxa has a leg up. Again, I mentioned, like, the amount of +1 counters... Just cards, the ones that mention +1 counters in those colors is like over 2,000 for budget. I'm not just talking about budget when it comes to the power level of each of these two. When it comes to dragons, yes, they have a ton of support, but that pales in comparison to the amount of +1 counter synergies, the amount of +1 counter, you know, support essentially. And then also at the end of the day, dragons are typically pretty expensive when it comes to mana value. It takes a little while to build things up. Yes, you get that cost reduction, and yes, that's very impactful. But Atraxa can get going a lot quicker than that. And yes, the dragons are massive, but Atraxa can definitely make the creatures even more massive. Again, with all those counter synergies, with all those +1 counter builds, with all that proliferating, you can make it into a point where Atraxa, again, is absolutely massive, and again, has flying. Good luck your opponents trying to swing through with their dragons on you. When you're like, okay, I block, dealt 15 damage, that dragon has gained 15, that dragon's gone. I'm going to swing back at you, gain another 15 next turn, or even more because I'm proliferate some more. You can pad your life to a ton as well. Again, if you need to go for an infect win, a poison win, I should say, you definitely can as well. So I think at the end of the day, if I had to pick one of the two and say which is better, and both are amazing, both are incredibly powerful, I am going with Atraxa. So that is my final decision. It's the final verdict for this channel. At least for now. Maybe in a couple of years I'll make another episode where I'm like, I was wrong! Goodness gracious, let me tell you all the ways that an air dragon is better. And also, my apologies that it was not the original dragon. Maybe it is. I don't know. Anyways, let me know in the comments below what your thoughts are on all this. Which do you think is the better commander? Which is the more powerful commander? Which of these, actually, have you built around? Have you built around either of them? Have you played against either of them? Let me know in the comments below. And of course, as always, thanks again and have a good one. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. We also have a ton of brand new t-shirt designs in stock, so make sure you check out those as well. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support.